Welcome to Saturday, Rough Cut viewers. Coffee Doug here. This week I will be continuing my reviews of the Tales from the Crypt franchise, as it is. I've been watching, obviously, the seasons. I've already reviewed a few of those, and I've started on the movies. The first one I've watched, I've got the double feature here, Tales from the Crypt, the movie, and Vault of Horror. I have not watched Vault of Horror yet, so I will review that later. Tales from the Crypt, the movie. This was made in '72, well before the series on HBO was ever even considered, but considerably long after the comic series had ended. It is rated PG. It runs about an hour and 23 minutes, and it was made in England, it seems. I could be wrong about that, but I know it wasn't made in America. So I know if I have made a mistake on that, about 17 of you will correct me just like that. And that's fine. I appreciate the corrections always. Don't let the PG scare you away. It is, basically everybody knows what Tales from the Crypt is. It's separate horror stories, and there's not like mass murdering and blood and guts and all, cussing and everything all over, and that's not the type of horror it is, and if you're any kind of fan, you know that. So PG is fine, especially back in the day. They were able to get away with enough, so it's fine. The premise, there actually is an overall story going on. There are 5 people that are trapped basically in a dungeon, and the Crypt Keeper shows up, who looks nothing like the HBO version, which I prefer, but he shows up. I like the HBO version, but in this movie it would have been weird. He shows up and he starts telling them, showing them a future, maybe if they're not careful, or maybe it's unavoidable, but he doesn't let them go, and he shows each of them a future. Like I said, there's 5 of them. Some interesting little points about this before I get into kind of what each story's about, and I'm not going to give anything away because I want you to enjoy it while you watch it. Joan Collins was in this movie. And a lot of people know who that is. I think she was on like Dallas or Dynasty or something, but people know who that is. She only had like 15 lines in this movie, and I've always heard Joan Collins in Tales from the Crypt, so that was kind of weird that she had like such top billing. And another thing that I read while looking this up is that Stephen King and George A. Romero were in talks to make this movie together. They wanted to, and they decided to pass on it. But some of the stories they came up with, and looking through Tales from the Crypt, they came up with the idea for Creepshow. So F yeah, Stephen King and George A. Romero, because Creepshow 1 and 2 are 2 of my favorite horror anthologies of all time. So, in Tales from the Crypt, like I said, there are 5 separate stories. The first one is And All Through the House, which I talked about when I reviewed Season 1. They borrowed from that one for this movie. It is the story of a lady that is at home with her daughter, and unfortunately, it's right around Christmas time, and there is an escaped mental patient roaming about the neighborhood dressed as Santa Claus. And he does show up at the house, and basically she can't call the police because she's committed a crime. So that's all I want to tell you. But the jumps at you are really good, and that reminds me, there was one scene in this movie, and there were times where I kind of jumped a little bit, or I was like, oh, that's really creepy. The makeup effects are, you can obviously tell, they're decades old, but that's alright. But there was a scene or two where my girlfriend literally jumped back, like, out of her seat, like, and screamed. It scared her, which I couldn't believe that happened in the '72 PG version of Tales from the Crypt. So we had a lot of fun watching it. But that is And All Through the House. So, it basically tells one person's story, then it goes back to the Crypt Keeper, then it goes to the next person, and so on and so on. The second one, if I remember right, was Reflection of Death, and that is it's a movie about 2 people, or, a guy has been in a car accident with a woman he's having an affair with, and when he wakes up, everything is quite wacky. And it's showing it through his eyes. So I really liked the camera work in that one. because you're kind of seeing things from his point of view, and you don't know why everything's so crazy. You don't know why he's seeing it that way. So I enjoyed that one as well. I thought, it took me a while to get into this movie. Like, I liked him, but I was like, okay, kind of older. Some of the dialogue's a little harder to understand because it's made in another country, and but I stuck with it and tried to enjoy it. When it got to the third one, which I'm going to look right here, because Poetic Justice. It's hard for me to remember the titles, but I remember what they're about. Poetic Justice was one of my favorites, and it really made me feel emotion, which is way more than most horror movies can do other than being scared or kind of laughing. But it is the story of a widower, a guy who has lost his wife, a year or so in the past, and he is a very nice guy, but he's kind of a collector of old things, and he's got a little bit of a rundown house. He doesn't have much money, but he makes toys for the kids, and he plays with them, and he's always friendly to people in the neighborhood, but he's poor, and it's in a rich area that is starting to develop very quickly. So there is one person that wants to basically sabotage him out of that area because he won't sell, because he lived there with his wife. So this person sabotages him, and it ruins his life. So it's just the story of what goes on after that happens. And obviously, with Tales from the Crypt, there's always some kind of twist, there's always some kind of weird ending, or, a lot of them are revenge stories, so keep that in mind. But that one really made me feel for the old guy, and he was just such a nice guy, and I really hated to see people be mean to him, but they got their just desserts, if that's the right way to use this term. I don't really recall. The next one was Wish You Were Here. And what was it about that one that I really liked? There was a... hold on, I gotta look. Because... Oh, the thing about this one that I liked was it's basically about 3 wishes. There is a statue that will grant you 3 wishes and 3 wishes only until it's passed on to the next owner. And I have always said since I was a little kid, if there were ever a genie or a leprechaun or anything like that that offered me any kind of wishes, I'd just tell them to carry on and get the hell out, because every time you make a wish like that, it backfires and totally screws you over, and it misinterprets your words, or just, it totally does just a tweak different what you asked, and it totally just F's up your world. So, that's basically what that one's about. I don't want to give too much away. I did find some big faults in that, like, why couldn't they have just given away the statue? Whatever. You don't have to get too deep into the story, but obviously they make some wishes that go horribly awry. And the last one was called Blind Alleys, and I want to say this one could have been one of my favorites because of the creepiness of it. It was the story of a brand new warden that takes over. I shouldn't even say warden. That's the he acts like a warden, but he takes over as the director of a home for the blind. And you can tell that he did a good job acting. That's how I viewed him, was that he acts like a warden, and he acts like it's a prison, and totally mistreats them, and acts like they're just not human beings and they don't deserve much. And he doesn't give them heat in the winter, and they start getting sick, and he takes meat out of their soup, so they only get like broth soup, and it's like a torture story basically. He's misusing these disabled people, like a lot of people in homes and stuff have talked about being abused and mistreated. And it turns out that just because they're blind doesn't mean they're stupid, warden jerk off. So they do a good job at coming up with a plan and getting him back. And it is just a tale of suspense, and the whole time it builds and builds and just boils and boils and boils and boils, and you're just waiting. You don't know what's going on. They make you wait. They do real good with for instance, there's a dog barking in this particular story, and that dog friggin' barks damn near the whole story. And it kind of gets to you as the viewer, and you're just like getting more and more tense and like, what the hell is going on? And they really deliver to release the tension. So, very good story. And then, of course, in the end, it goes to the Crypt Keeper, and they do their thing. So I liked how it had the overall. I liked how it had 5 stories. I was very familiar with And All Through the House. I will say that the HBO series, in my opinion, did it much better and much creepier. Now, granted, that was a whole decade later, or more, almost 20 years later. So, usually, that's the way it'll happen. But I didn't recognize the other 4, so that was kind of nice. Now, maybe as I go through the series, I will, and like I said, I've never read the comics, so I do recommend Tales from the Crypt the movie, even though it's PG, and let me know what you think of it if you're a Tales from the Crypt fan or if you're not. Until next Saturday, Coffee Doug.